As art historians, we're trained to speak about architecture formally. We're trained to analyze it from a design point of view, to speak about architectonics, materials, etc. We come to concept and eventually to human narratives. For the first time, a couple of summers ago, I used architecture as a tool for human investigations. I used it by researching a site in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, a high school which incarnates the ideals of reason, hygiene, and functionality, and was built in the 60s, in the early 60s. That high school was going to go through a brutal adaptation and reuse under the Khmer Rouge. When you look at the architecture before it was invested by the Khmer Rouge, it looks like a very typical Cambodian high school. A beautiful garden provides shades and a refreshing heaven from the sun and a tropical rain for the kids and for even the passerbys, as the permeability to the urban fabric is really thin. The gates were always open. The buildings themselves were conceptually conceived around the theme of openness. Everything is open. Nothing is quite enclosed. The galleries are open, protected by a concrete parapet. The classrooms are open and permit cross ventilation. There's no glass on the windows. It closes with the wooden shutters so that when the monsoon rain pours, you can still breathe inside, and it controls the humidity. Light is diffused. It's a beautiful place to learn. On April 17, 1975, the Khmer Rouge took over Phnom Penh. Within 48 hours, the city was evacuated. For the next 4 years, it will become a ghost town. Everything was emptied. Businesses were closed, pagodas burned, buildings destroyed. The high school avoided destruction, the fate of many schools. But its fate was darker. It became a secret torture center at the heart of Phnom Penh. When you arrived at S21, you were entering in a very dark machine. 12,380 people, women, men, but also children, tiny little children. And the account of the numbers of people who went there is not precise. We think there may be more, much more than these 12,380 people. They arrived there, and 7 of them only survived. A Kafkaian logic ran through the institution. You came guilty of something you did not know, your jailer did not know, but you were to discover through the use of torture. Once you had admitted your crimes, you were executed, a real liberation. But admitting took some time. The high school incarnated so much its ideal of openness in the design that it was very difficult for it to be turned into a jail and to hush the sounds of torture when it had been echoing the giggles of children. The courtyard, to the contrary, was the easiest to corrupt. Equipped for physical exercise, it was metamorphosed into a torture apparatus. The gym apparatus turned into torture instruments. You could hang people, tie them, torture them from them. The garden itself became a little farmette to feed the staff, pigs, vegetables. The buildings resisted. They had to be turned into cages. And for that, their whole openness, their whole spirit of openness had to be corrupted. So windows were equipped with bars. Corrugated iron wrapped the galleries. The whole site was off limit, wrapped up in 6 rows of corrugated iron. The classrooms, which were once airy and breathy, were divided into tiny cells not larger than a toilet stall. The architecture was fractured, you can see mutilated, so that a pathway was created for the guard tours. It still to this day bears the scars of these absolutely brutal transformations. Upstairs, the classrooms were not divided, but were kept for the gathering of 50 people at a time, 12 of them shackled to a metal rod that was pinned to the wall. And you can see on the slides the holes in the wall where the chains were anchored, and each number refers to a prisoner. Because the windows were bricked, there was no more cross-ventilation. The humidity gathered, the place stank. There was blood everywhere, and the stains remained until the late 80s. Today, the site is a museum and an archival center. The interior spaces of the high school and of the torture center still coexist, overlap, are present. But of course, one can imagine that the space of the torture center dominates. Places of unbearable memories have a very heavy presence. It is the case with the many, many sites of the Holocaust, the site of Ground Zero, sites all over the world in Rwanda, and a site in Cambodia. Symbolically, we associate these architectures with the agency of evil, or for being a victim of evil. In my relationship with the Cambodian site, I alternate in my feelings. Sometimes I think that the architecture was an accomplice to the evil that happened there. Sometimes I think that it is solidary to the human fate and was a victim of the evil. The site had been turned from a machine to live to a machine to kill. And its existential role that usually the architecture has, which is to provide shelter, to provide healthy living, had disappeared. The role of the high school in Phnom Penh is multi-layered. It was at once the accomplice of the torturer and the victim, like I alternate, but it's also the witness of the events that happened there. It is the beholder of its memories, and it is the standing proof that it all happened. Architecture is a character for me, because I can't help thinking that it took part in the action, whether being a victim or being an accomplice. In any case, architecture characterizes our human lives. It is a mirror to our humanity, for its greatest achievements or its deepest failures. Architecture's existential roles in Cambodia or in Auschwitz or at Ground Zero were so dramatically important, but they're just as important in our lives. I have come to understand that architecture's relationship is to our human condition is fundamental. But not only that, architecture in relationship to our human nature is fundamental. Thank you.